Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm showing you how to make a recipe from my book Delicious Gluten Free Meals. And today we're making gluten free naan breads, and this is in the simple sides chapter. It's a really easy yeasted dough and you should not be put off by the fact that we're using yeast. Trust me, it's so much easier than you might think. So let's get cooking and I'll show you how easy these are to make with your favourite curry. Find the recipe on page 209 of Delicious Gluten Free Meals. Now the first thing we need is some warm water, and it's really important when you're using yeast to make sure that the water is the right temperature. So I would really recommend you invest in getting a food thermometer. I think this cost me about £8 on Amazon. I'll put a link to one in the description down below, and it's just so worth it because it's going to save you a lot of troubleshooting. Because if the water's too hot, your yeast is going to just die, and if the water's not hot enough, it's not going to activate the yeast and it's just not going to do anything. So first of all, I'm going to check the temperature. I want it to be around 40 degrees, and this is pretty much bang on. And then I'm going to add some sugar. Now a lot of people ask me if you need sugar in my bread recipes, and the answer is we're only using a tiny bit, and that is just to activate the yeast. So I really recommend not skipping the sugar in this recipe. So I'm just going to add that to my yeast. I'm going to give that a stir. And then I want 7 grams of yeast for this recipe, and you want like a quick yeast or a dried active yeast for this. Make sure you double check. Most yeasts are gluten free, but some aren't, so always just check on the label to make sure the one you're using is safe if you have celiac. So I'm going to add my yeast to the water now. And then all we're going to do is give it a good stir. You can kind of smell it already doing its job. And all we're going to do now is cover that with a tea towel and leave that for 5 or 10 minutes in a warm spot while we get all the other ingredients ready. While we're waiting for the yeast to activate, we're just going to get all the rest of our ingredients together in the bowl ready to go. So the first thing we need to add to the bowl is our gluten-free white bread flour. Now you can use a plain gluten-free flour if that's all you have, but I'd really recommend getting the white bread flour if you can get it. It does have tapioca flour in and a few other different ingredients, which just makes a bit of an easier texture when you're making gluten-free bread. So add this to your bowl. And then of course we're going to add some xanthan gum, because this is what I use in all of my breads and it just really helps replicate the texture of gluten in a gluten-free bake. Going to add in some salt for flavour. And then my key ingredient for a gluten-free naan bread is nigella seeds. Now you don't have to put these in if you want a plain naan, but they just smell so good, and to me this is the smell of like a naan bread that you'd always get from the takeaway, and I think that's what really differentiates this from any other kind of flatbread. So I would definitely recommend putting these in. They also just add a really cool pop of colour because they're black, so they just look really nice speckled in the naan breads. And of course, if you want to make any other flavours, you could add like garlic, coriander, anything you fancy into these, but I'm just going for a plain naan with these nigella seeds speckled throughout. And just give this a good stir so that all of those ingredients are combined. And now I'm going to go check on my yeast. Okay, the yeast has had about 10 minutes. As you can see, it started to get a sort of froth on top, but that's exactly what we want. And so I'm just going to pour this yeast straight into my mixture. Try and get it all in. And it smells like yeasty as well, so you know that the yeast is activated. If it hasn't frothed up at all, it's likely your yeast is either out of date or your water was too hot or too cold. I always use yogurt in naan bread, so I'm going to add some yogurt to this mixture as well. And finally, a little bit of olive oil. And then I'm just going to mix this together until it forms a nice sticky dough. And that's really how simple it is to make the dough for your naan bread. So if you were worried about making bread or using yeast, I mean, that's as simple as it gets really. Now there's a lot of difference between making gluten-free bread and normal bread. With normal bread you'd have more of a dough that you can knead and shape. With gluten-free bread you tend to end up with either a batter or a very sort of sticky dough like what we have here, but don't worry if you're new to gluten-free bread, this is perfectly normal. That is basically all we need to do with that. So I'm just going to leave this in the bowl. I'm going to scrape everything off the spoon. The next stage is to leave our dough to prove. So I'm going to cover this with cling film and then I'm going to pop it in a warm spot. I like to put it in a radiator or in a sunny window ledge. It's very cold today while filming this, so I've got the heating on. I'm going to pop it by the radiator and leave it for an hour. And unlike some breads, this won't puff up a lot, like some breads double in size. It will puff up a little bit, but don't expect it to kind of double in size. We just want a little bit of a rise through this proof. So I'm just going to cover it, leave it for an hour, and then we'll come back and make our naan breads. Now my naan breads have been proving for an hour, and as you can see they have gone a little bit puffier, but it's not like doubled in size, so that just sort of gives you an idea of what to expect. But you can see that when I kind of puff the dough it does feel a little bit lighter. So that's what we want, just that little bit of puff. And we are going to make 4 naan breads from these. So for this we need our trusty baking paper or cling film and some extra flour for dusting. Now I'm going to flour this, but I'm also going to flour my hands before I handle the bread. And I've got a dough scraper as well to help me out a little bit. And I want to basically divide this into 4. So I'm going to take a quarter of this dough and I'm going to put it out on my bit of baking paper. And as you can see, it's lovely and light. It's not that sticky with a little bit of flour on my hands. So I'll pop it on there, a little bit more flour on top just to stop it sticking to the next bit of paper. Now I want a kind of like teardrop shape, a bit like you get with a normal naan bread, but you can make them round or rustic or any shape you like really. So if you find it easier, you can put another bit of cling film on top, but I'm just gonna sort of freestyle this by keeping my hands nice and floured so the dough doesn't stick to it. Now these should puff up a little bit in the pan, so I want them to be around 1 centimetre in thickness. It's not the greatest teardrop shape, but it'll work. So just brush off the excess flour, and then we're going to transfer this into a hot pan. So now my pan is nice and hot. You've got 2 options. You can either put the bread down with this on, or if you can get the paper off, get that off of there and straight into a dry pan. And as you can see, we've got some lovely bubbles where it's starting to puff up, so I'm going to flip this now. And then I'm just going to give this another 2 minutes on that side. See the lovely sort of brown speckles? It's looking and smelling just like a real naan bread. Now my naan breads are all cooked, and my final step is that I've heated up some garlic butter that I just want to paint onto them just to give them that amazing garlicky tasty finish. So I'm just going to pop them on my plate that I would serve them up on. And then I've basically got this garlic butter that I'm just going to paint on top of them. Now this is going to add flavour, but it's also going to keep them lovely and warm and squishy and yummy and soft so they don't dry out. And then for decoration, I'm just going to put a little bit of sprinkle of coriander on top. And again, if you want to, you could flavour the naan breads by chopping up coriander and adding it to the mixture, and the same with the garlic, but I just like how it adds a little fleck of colour. And here they are, my gluten-free naan breads. They are soft and pillowy and delicious. They've got lovely little puffed up pockets. They've got the flavour of the nigella seeds. Oh, I cannot wait to tuck into these. Now, if you're looking for something to have these with, I have got a classic chicken curry in my book. I've got my chickpea and potato curry, which you guys love. I've got lots and lots of recipes that you can pair these with, and you can also freeze them. I recommend doing that between sheets of baking paper so they don't stick to each other. But I always say heat them up before eating, and oh, it will just make the best Indian takeaway night ever. Now, if you want to give my gluten-free naan breads a go, you'll find the recipe in page 209 of Delicious Gluten-Free Meals in the Simple Sides chapter. I've got loads of other great side dishes like onion bhajis and samosas in there. So if you're gluten-free, you don't have to miss out. Pick up my book and you'll find all the recipes in there. I'll pop a link to the book in the description down below, and if you have got a copy, I'd really appreciate it if you left a review because it really means a lot to a first-time author like me. But for now, I'm going to tuck into these naan breads. Thank you for watching, hit subscribe if you like videos like this, and I'll see you again soon. Just like I used to have from the takeaway. Well, it looks like we'll be having curry tonight then.